So let's just go down the line. James, we'll start with you. Just go down the line, introduce yourself, who you are, and just kind of like 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the most, what your involvement is.
So my name is James Salmon. I'm an attorney by training. I have a company, Collaborative Construction, which helps owners, contractors, and designers plan, design, and construct facilities virtually first. We usually spend somewhere between 6 and 12, maybe 15 months, depending on the scope and the nature of the project, actually virtually planning and designing and constructing the facility before we ever stick a shovel in the ground. And I write the legal agreements that provide a framework for that team to work within. My hobby horse is that I think that our existing legal agreements are broken and we fragment our teams. We resolve differences adversarially, and we instill mistrust. And you get what you contract for. And that's what we contract for, is mistrust, adversarial relationships, and fragmented teams. And we need the exact opposite. We need to have teams that are integrated, collaborative, and trust one another. And the blockchain provides us with a really interesting opportunity to provide escrowed payments to teams and really help with that trust piece of that process.
We'll get into good details on that. Lewis.
Sure, thank you everybody. Again, Lewis Cohen, partner here at Home Levels, and work a lot in blockchain across verticals, but including significantly real estate. Of course, I have the pleasure of working with Ragnar and others on the Cook County pilot program, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, so Lewis is one of the important attorneys on the Cook County program in Chicago that we did. We concluded in May, June, and so he had a lot of good insights. And I won't steal his thunder. Ovidio.
I am Ovidio Diaz. I am an attorney admitted in New York City. I'm also a civil lawyer in Panama, and I was an investor in a developing country, and I learned about all the problems with title there. And I am going to be talking about title in developing countries, which is a big problem.
Hi, I'm one of the co-founders of Cohen. We probably were most well known for the Swedish pilot projects that we are doing. Also released yesterday pilot in India, and soon hopefully in another country that we can say.
So good diverse panel. I mean, we've got 2 American attorneys, Panama and New York. I mean, it's all Central America that you know. And then, or they're in Sweden, and then you said India. So I think this will be good about title, because title it's a lot of it. It's just a legal system, and there's the American legal system, Panama, Sweden. So that's a lot of what's going to come down to. So let's start. I think So let's start with you. What did you guys do in Sweden? What are you doing in Sweden? How does it relate to the blockchain in terms of title?
So we started the pilot project back a year ago, something like that. The first person we contacted basically on the whole real estate sale, including the title transaction itself, also in the mortgage process. So we started back a year ago. Then we realized it's very hard doing the actual title on the blockchain in Sweden because of some legal issues, because you couldn't actually digitize the title yet in Sweden. By law, it needed to be physically signed in the end of the real estate sale. So instead of the title part, we managed to focus also on the process of how you can streamline the whole way of a real estate sale. So this is what we ended up in doing, about reconciling the whole process between the different kind of actors in the chain. And we released another pilot 2 months ago, and now hopefully we'll do a bunch of live transactions as well. So we have a consortium there with the Swedish land registry, Land Madrid, a couple of mortgage banks, a big integrator, and a telecom company there. So that is basically what it looks like. So because we couldn't touch on the title, we decided to focus on what we can, and that is the process, which is also very painful too.
It's a complicated process. Ovidio, a lot of questions I could ask you, but let's just start big picture. So what problems do you see And just big picture, why would blockchain solve them, and how can they not solve them, maybe, also?
There are basically three problems. The first one is that 70% of the land in the world, in developing countries, is not titled at all. So they're outside of registries, and there's ownership-based property, but until they're titled and registry, there's no property rights. So therefore, that is the biggest problem. And it takes a lot of money, a lot of data gathering to be able to bring it into the system. Take a country like Brazil, where there is approximately 20 million homes. There is, each title, each process would cost around anywhere between $500 to $1,000. So that's $10 to $20 billion. The governments would rather build roads and hydroelectric plants than invest in legal security. That's the first problem. The second problem is that the registries are inefficient. And so it could take months to do a sale, purchase, to buy a property. A lot of them are, the information is not right, the surveys are not right. So it's riddled with risks, and there's no title insurance. So that is, so therefore you're basically taking a lot of risks. How can blockchain deal with that? The first problem, which is bringing untitled land into the registry, is very difficult because you need to invest a lot of money, a lot of data gathering. You need to do surveys. You need to figure out the bundle of rights, who owns it, is it marital property, is it community property, is it individual property, are there rights of use, easements, mineral rights, water rights, you name it. Are there conflicts? There is 8 million hectares, 20 million acres of land in Colombia that are under dispute. So how do you resolve all of that? So that's not going to help very much the blockchain. Once it's in the registry, and that's the second use, that is actually where the blockchain comes in. And you can actually do three things. One, you can create a new registry, blockchain-based. In a lot of countries, there's no registry, period. In other ones, you can replace an existing one, which is what's happening in Eastern Europe. And on the third one, you can improve the existing one. You have the problem that in most countries, all civil law countries, the transfer has to be before a notary public. It cannot be done on the blockchain. So therefore, but you can create methods if you change the laws that the transfer could be done on the blockchain. But most importantly, the work in the registry itself, how the properties are actually registered, could be on the blockchain. And you're going to hear about this because we're actually working right now with some governments to be able to improve or their registry using blockchain technology.
Yeah, so we'll leave that to this afternoon where you can talk about what you're doing in Mexico with Carolina, where is she? Oh, there she is in the back. So they're doing something interesting with the Mexican government there, so we'll leave that kind of for then. But so blockchain doesn't solve the problem of garbage in, garbage out. It doesn't solve the problem of disputed records. It's not a magic wand for that. You got to solve that something else. But once you have the correct data about the property, putting it on the blockchain then does what? What's so great about that?
Let me just say one more thing, and that is blockchain is being used to bypass the registry. For example, they put the property in a corporation which issues shares, and the transfer of those shares occurs on the blockchain. So it completely bypasses the registry system.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point that we can talk about too, is does it make sense to have a parallel system? Would it make sense to have a private blockchain title system in parallel with the government? And there's pros and cons to that. Okay, I'll ask you what are the pros and cons to that, because that's a very interesting question, because most governments are resistant, obviously. They don't want to be replaced by the blockchain, of course not. But maybe you can start with a private chain and then see there's uses for that, but well, maybe that's my next question for you. Okay, Louis, I'm gonna have a hard question for you. So we worked together in Chicago. Maybe you could just summarize real quick kind of what we did and talk about the difference between, the conveyance blockchain versus the recording blockchain, that topic.
Sure. So what's fascinating, Ragnar, is here in the States, the situation really isn't all that different from what you see, either in Sweden or in some of the emerging markets that Ovidio you described. In many cases, it's actually worse here in a well-developed country because, as I'm sure everybody knows, we have a county-based reporting system. So right there, you've got 3,000 some odd counties to attack. Now, we're fortunate to have the leadership of Cook County, which includes the city of Chicago and Ibrea, led by Ragnar, to actually do a pilot program. And this, I think, to our knowledge, is the first pilot program led by a government, a reporter's office, the Cook County Reporter's Office, and a gentleman named John Merkelman was a real leader in that space, to actually formally engage the government together with the support of Ibrea and also Lifthrasir, another company that Ragnar leads, to look into this question. So fundamentally, the question is, what can we do in a relatively typical U.S. jurisdiction to either address the question of recordation or conveyance, or both potentially? And in short, because we've got to keep going, we can come back to this. As with all the other jurisdictions, to no one's great surprise, recordation is a challenge for the reason that we said we have a single reporter's set of books, and sort of trying to imagine a complete restart on that would be challenging. But conveyance is much more promising. There's some very interesting findings around conveyance. Because of the security associated with the Bitcoin blockchain, the group decided to pursue a conveyance route based on what are known as colored coins, which is kind of like a side chain associated with Bitcoin, and to experiment whether colored coins could be used to facilitate the conveyance of a real property. And we actually made tremendous progress in that regard, legally, by showing how you could use the transfer on the actual Bitcoin blockchain of a token or a colored coin to represent a conveyance. Now, as a practical matter, because of statutory limitations in the state of Illinois, that was not all of the transfer. There had to be a formalized document still filed with the reporter's office, but it paved the way and it showed direction of where things are going. And the conclusion of the Cook County Reporter's Office report was that blockchain presented a great opportunity to improve systems, and it identified some areas where more work needs to be done, including the notarization problem, which is present here in the U.S. as well. Right now, the state of Illinois does not allow anything other than in-person notarization. So if you're going to use the blockchain to effect a conveyance, your notary would have to be there in the room with you. Interestingly, Virginia does have a sort of notary by video process. And theoretically, one could have used a Virginia document, et cetera. We didn't really go down that far, but there continue to be constraints. But it really moved that whole dialogue forward. And for those who haven't read the Cook County Reporter's report, it's available on the website, maybe linked to on the Ibrea website, and I certainly suggest taking a look at that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in terms you still deal with the notary. So even in the U.S., we have the advantage of being on the deed system where buyer and seller can convey directly. You don't need the government agency to do the transfer. You still have to notarize it. And ideally, you can do it remotely, like you brought up Virginia, I think it was, right?
Yep.
That Virginia, I think they have notaries remote.
Yes, so they have a system in Virginia where you actually go online and a video, and they, I guess, check your surroundings. There's no one with a gun, right behind you. They've got a whole process around that, and use that. So yes, you can have, as Ragnar, you allude to, a private conveyance, and the regiment. We're getting a little bit more detail, but as many of you are real estate professionals are aware, as between the parties, that type of conveyance is 100% effective. The property is conveyed, and the transferee on the Bitcoin blockchain ledger is the new owner. Now, if you're not registered in the registrar's office, you're subject to potential, attacks from third parties, which, does need to be considered. But just as a theoretical matter, we were able to demonstrate how a property could be conveyed between two private parties using the Bitcoin blockchain.
So that's an important point. So when people talk about title, it's two things. It's conveyance, transferring ownership of the property, and then recording that conveyance. In the U.S., That's what we were able to do in Chicago, was test the conveyance, because we use a deed system now in Sweden. Panama, you can't do that. The notario, the notary has to do that. James, so going to you. So one problem we found with our Cook County pilot program in VLOX was, okay, we could follow the chain of title if you transfer it on the blockchain. That makes sense. But there's this off-chain stuff. There's the liens and all those things that aren't part of a blockchain title. So maybe you could talk about that in terms of the issues of getting those liens on, because that's an important piece. You buy a property and it has a lien on it, you didn't know about it, well, why even use a blockchain at all then?
Right, well, I think that what we need to do as an organization, as people who are interested in this, is we need to encourage our governmental entities to think through good policy. And one of the things that I think needs to happen is there needs to be a recognition of the value that's inherent in utilizing blockchain in this way to stimulate the economy and to stimulate the exchange of real property in this super efficient way. And one of the problems, of course, is that you've got judgments that are of record, and those judgments are then going to attach to that property. Someone may have a lien against the property, and that lien will attach to the property. All of these books, they're massive books in the recorder's office. You may have researched title in your time from, in your careers as real estate professionals. You've got to go look up the mortgage, you've got to go look up the deed book, then there's a separate lien book, and then there's a separate recorded judgments. And in Kentucky, what we've seen in the last number of years is some young, very entrepreneurial companies coming up and converting those antiquated land records into a very useful digital database that can be searched easily. And the title companies are paying $35 a pop, if not more, to access that data that this private enterprise has gone out and hoovered up and placed in a digital format. The government officials don't have any incentive whatsoever to go back in there and go through this difficult process of placing, these ancient 1990s, 1890s records on a blockchain. But title insurance companies that are going to insure title have an incentive to make sure that's right, and these young entrepreneurial enterprises that are out there trying to sell access to that data to the people like us, blockchain advocates who want to be able to do this digitally, are going to have that incentive. So you alluded to this earlier, Ragnar, in your presentation, where you said, what's the value that's being added? And to me, I think what we want to do as an organization and as individuals and entities that are interested in utilizing blockchain and leveraging the web more efficiently to transfer title to real property, is we need to find those enterprises out there that are willing to invest the sweat, blood, and tears required to get that antiquated record updated and modernized and digitized. And they need to get paid. They're not going to do it for free. And the government isn't going to do it because, as someone else on the panel alluded to, they want to build another bridge, they want to build another road, they want to put their name on a project that is more prominent. And they're not going to invest time, energy, and money in this. And I would rather they not.
Yeah, it comes down to incentives.
Yeah, I'd like to incentivize it privately.
Yeah, incentives. So they're not going to do it. So like you said, the basic problem is you have this data in 5 different places regarding a property. But there's no incentive for those people, whether it's liens, whether it's title, whatever it is, to share their data. So going back to my presentation about networks and incentives and tokens, that's where I think it's going to solve. You and I have talked about this before, but basically needing to set up business solutions, incentivize these people to all share their data into the same place. And once you can either tokenize that or some financial mechanism to do that, well then it's like drawing the bugs out of the darkness or something.
And we're paying for that already as a society We're here in the States, we pay for it in the form of title insurance.
Yeah.
You know, we're asking somebody else to go figure that out for us. In these other, you know, countries, you may be paying for it with just taking on an exorbitant risk, a really big risk. But it is a cost that's already there, and the blockchain gives us the ability to reduce the cost of mitigating that risk.
Once it's there. So, or I'm going to go back to you. You know, for me, it's sometimes difficult to see title in these other countries because the government does the conveyance. So if you can't transfer peer-to-peer, what can you do with blockchain, like what you guys have done? What are the good things you can do if you still have the government doing the conveyance around title? So how does blockchain help with that land system?
So yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it's about the sharing data problem as well, and people tend to mix blockchains with that. So blockchain is not a good sharing data solution, but it's a good shared ledger solution. So while we worked, I mean, with our partners, we found out that specific problem basically, and that is how we came across to what we are doing now, which governments tend to like a little bit more, which putting like blockchains on top of relational databases that already exist today. So it's very much it's much convenient for them to grasp in terms of that, because it sits already on the infrastructure they already have. They don't have to rebuild it entirely. They don't have to use it in a parallel system at all. So essentially, it's like a consensus on top of that. So it's still a blockchain, and they don't get to read and write as much as they want to as well. So it's all about, as you said, sharing data problem.
Makes sense. Ovidio, so, you know, the challenge is launching these things. So do you see a value in a parallel system where you do have a private enterprise, and maybe it's property owners who say, okay, yes, we're still going to do it the government records and system, but we also want to start doing sort of a private one. What are the values, drawbacks, advantages maybe to that approach?
I think there is a huge benefit in creating, in some countries, a parallel, in a way, private registry, where people can either voluntarily, subject to some protocols, register their properties. They do a survey, they have the boundaries determined, and so on, and have that run parallel to the public registry, officially sanctioned registry. The problem is you get one thing but not the second one. You do get publicity, which is probably the most important function of a registry, is to let the rest of the world know that you have this property, that it has a lien or it doesn't, that it belongs to one person or to the spouses and so on. You get that, and that gets a market going. However, it does not get official recognition from the government, so therefore it's standing in terms of let's say priority. If the person sells twice, if you have it officially recognized, the first transaction would be the valid one. You lose some of those advantages. But basically, you do get the most important function of a registry, which is publicity. And what we want by creating that publicity is to give value to those unregistered or badly registered land. It creates value because people know it's there, they know the boundaries, they have surveys. Today they have no value because you don't know about the specifics of the property. So that is a huge advantage.
Exactly. So it's not you're replacing the government registry, you're bringing new value to people who don't have value, basically.
That's right.
I do want to leave time for questions. We have, let's see how much this ends. So we've got 5 minutes, so I want to give you guys more time, but I do want to get to some questions and then we can jump back. So does anyone have any questions? So let's the microphone. So we'll try to just do 5 minutes of questions if you guys run out of questions then.
There we go, it's muted. Louis, this is a question for you. I'm incredibly excited to hopefully have a precedent in title for the pilot project that you went through in Chicago. It was a fully insured transaction.
So, for a variety of reasons, the project participants chose to not do an actual title transfer because there were a whole bunch of logistical issues that really were not relevant to the findings of the conclusion. But had we gone in that direction, yes, absolutely would have been an insured transfer. The reason that would have been difficult is because it was a dual conveyance, whereby the conveyance was also going to be recorded in the primary system. So the conveyance via the Bitcoin blockchain showed the way in which you could transfer on a blockchain-based ledger, but you also would have had a fully recorded. So I don't believe, Ragnar, we would have any issues at all in terms of getting title insurance.
A quick follow-up. So, if you were, I knew you were working with an agent, so there must have been an underwriter behind it. That was Chicago Title, right?
Yeah, so yeah, we were working with a title insurance company to make sure the title was clear when we tested it. But that wasn't the key part. We were really just looking at, can you convey it? Would it be a legal conveyance? We weren't looking at the insurance part. It was just, if you create a token for the property, you send it from seller to buyer, is that considered a legal conveyance? And the answer was yes, which was the big win we got with that was, yes, you can convey property with a blockchain. And not only that, you can convey it on the blockchain, but then you can record it with the government. Government doesn't need to run any blockchain software or anything. You just print something out. So in terms of the title insurance company we're working with, it was just kind of a quick glance like, hey, give us a quick property report on this.
But no title insurance policy will be generated?
It would be up to the people, yeah, the owners. Another question, we got
Maybe Ragnar, just wanted a quick sort of supplemental point, because I just wanted to flag in people's mind one other key word when you think about that, and that's standardization. Whether you're in a single jurisdiction, a single registrar jurisdiction, or multiple, one of the biggest challenges here is standardization, and in particular a unique property identifier. And I just wanted to flag that for people who are working on that or thinking about that. And if I can ask the group a question, how many people in this room have heard of something called what 3 words? Got it. Let me tell you, focus on this. This is a remarkable, remarkable project in which somebody went out and mapped the entire globe in 3 meter by 3 meter squares, giving them unique identifiers. I'm happy to talk to anyone offline, but standardization and property identification are absolute critical pieces of this puzzle.
What 3 words?
What 3 words?
What 3 words?
What 3 words?
Good one.
Hi, thank you. My name's Bob. So New York City already has all the records online. I don't know if you're aware of that. You probably are. The Acris. I'm in the title insurance industry in New York. So have you reached out to them to? My first question is, I understand the need for the registry, but wouldn't it be better for Iberia to put the resources into reaching out to the New York City to make that happen literally? I mean, I sit on committees with New York City for recordation.
You just volunteered to be our point man?
Yeah.
There we go.
I'll give him your phone number. I'll give him your email.
I'm an underwriter.
We're very aware of Acris. We use it all the time in our
No
real estate team. It is actually, all things considered, it's a pretty good solution. There have been, different states have been more engaged with blockchain than others. In addition to Illinois, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the state of Delaware has been very active. The state of New York, for various reasons, has not yet. But if, we're very open to approaches, and if you know folks, let's talk.
A question for Ovidio. So you mentioned in Brazil the number of homes and how the government would really not rather spend the money, they'd rather put it into infrastructure. So a question, as you look across Latin America in particular, where you have governments that have, if they have the property properly documented, it gives rise to a future revenue stream in terms of property taxes. So, is there a value proposition there for them to spend the money to actually do the surveys right and to go through this process?
Absolutely. It creates value in all respects. For the governments, it means property taxes. It makes transactions in real estate possible. It allows the owners to get loans because banks don't lend against untitled land. However, governments are not willing to spend the money and the resources as well as to deal with the legal problems involved. The World Bank, the IDB, the European Bank, they all fund this problem, these projects. I talked to the head of the World Bank, Americas, in charge of funding them, and he said governments don't want them. Panama is a very good example. They decided 5 years ago that they were not going to do it anymore, and 70% is untitled. Again, it's very expensive. And they don't think it's a priority. You could take a socialist system, a Scandinavian country, a complete capitalist system, US, UK, and there's one thing that is common to both, and that is the stability of property rights. And then you take developing countries, and there's one thing that is common to all of them, and that is the lack of stability of property rights. And then you say, why are they poor? And you end up with one conclusion, and that is 70% of the people are deemed not to own their only property.
And this is part of IBREA's role. We hope to have conversations with different governments, facilitate those like we did in Chicago. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're working on a title project, either you want a government contact or you have a government contact and you want someone like, a Lewis or these other panelists, all four of these guys are great, someone to just kind of like be a neutral third party or facilitate, like that's definitely what we're here for, is to kind of bring entrepreneurs to the government. And, they'll talk about this afternoon, Carolina and doing in Mexico. Let's have one more question and then we gotta go to the next thing. Venezuela. And you corrected me. So say it again, one Bitcoin is worth how many Venezuelan bolivars?
121 millions. Bolivars is 1 Bitcoin.
Say it again in the microphone.
121 millions.
Is one Bitcoin.
Is one.
Go ahead.
Okay, my question is regarding the conveyance made in Chicago. Was the buyer and the seller in the contract digital identity? And the other question is, you had to tokenize a property to be able to transfer on the blockchain, right? So can the buyer store that asset in an electronic wallet? Can I have my apartment in a wallet?
So what was the first question about ID, if it was a digital ID?
Yeah, in the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, so in Chicago, our property owner was one person and he owned a building and it was through an LLC, and so he owned it. And he was going to transfer the property from one company to another company. And yes, it was a Bitcoin colored coin, which was the token that represented the property. And we forged colored coins. And so we created a blockchain deed and a colored coin. He had a wallet and we integrated with Trezor. So he actually stored his property on a Trezor, which is, one of the most secure ways you could store Bitcoin or any digital asset. And yes, he was able to transfer back and forth. And did I miss the second question? Oh yeah, so then yeah, you would store your digital deed in your wallet like you would like a colored coin wallet. In fact, the person who wrote the first colored coin protocol, I think, was your CTO. So yeah. So anyways, did I answer your question? Okay. We'll thank our panel for this, and we'll thank you very much.